do have a script over here, so I'm going to be reading a little bit. You guys know me already. I'm Kay, super duper active angel investor here in Silicon Valley. And today, I'd like to welcome everyone to the third episode of the Future of Work series. And as always, I'd like to thank the organizers of this event, which they allow me to do something interesting with my life. Haha, just kidding. Those event organizers are Cognitive Talent Solutions, or CTS, DCH, and HR Tech Hub. So thanks to you guys for putting this together and giving me something to do. Hey, Jennifer, welcome. So let's get started. I guess, today's episode is titled A Decentralized Future from Organigrams to Organizational Networks. And it'll be structured as a fireside chat. So since I'm the moderator for us today, again, feel free to engage anytime. I want to make it super fun, super engaging. And then also, I'm going to introduce the guests, or if you guys want, you could do your own solo introduction. So I guess, Francisco, let's just start with you. Let's go with that.
Sure. So thanks, Kay, and hi, everyone. My name is Francisco Marin, and I'm a co-founder and CEO at CTS. I come originally from Spain, but I'm based in Palo Alto in California, and we are a people analytics company focusing on organization and network analysis. Before that, I was working at IBM for 5 years as business analytics leader for the shared services centers in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And yeah, I'm very passionate about organizational networks, about people analytics, and the future of work. So really happy to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you, Francisco. Andrew, could you give a little intro about yourself?
Hi, Kay, and hi, everybody. Great to see such a global audience today. My name is Andy Spence. I'm based in the UK on the South Coast by the sea today. My passion is making work better, so it's great to be included in this conversation today. I'm an independent consultant, and I've worked on over 30 global transformation programs over the years. I advise tech firms on product strategy and employers on workforce strategy. I wrote a paper 4 or 5 years ago about how we could use blockchain, decentralized technologies in the new infrastructure of work. You might know me from my writing the Workforce Futurist newsletter, and I tweet like a bird at Andy Spence. So that's my intro.
Oh, man, awesome intro. And Jennifer, I know you just joined, but would love to hear a little bit of an intro about yourself, and we can get started.
I'm Jennifer Paylor, and I'm the head of learning, talent, and culture at Capgemini North America. And I've had a lot of great experiences across my career. My first chapter was 23 years at IBM, and my second chapter is here at Capgemini. I like to call myself a shipbuilder, and I build a lot of strong relationships, also had a lot of experience developing leaders and leadership. And now, really focusing a lot on what does stewardship look like and how do we set up the right cultures for corporations to build the right spaces so people can flourish. And I spent some time with Francisco at IBM. So really big on large enterprises and how we scale the right people, leaders, and culture across large organizations.
Awesome. And you mentioned 23 years at IBM.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Wow. I got to clap for that one.
Great chapter 1.
Oh yeah. Okay. So everyone, thank you so much for the introduction. We're gonna get started here. We got a person in the crowd saying, "Let's go, Jennifer," from Maria. I guess if I pronounced correctly, Bucci. Not sure where in the world, but welcome. So I guess we could just jump right into the panel time and start with the scripted questions that we have over here. So as usual, fireside chat style, I'm gonna ask a question and then I'm gonna go around one by one. And today we have 2 questions. Then the second half, we're going to break into just a question from everyone in the audience. If there's no question in the audience, I guess I have also a bunch of decentralized questions for you guys. So we'll go with that. So the first question, how does your organization leverage organizational networks? Francisco, we're going to start with you.
Sure. So, well, at CTS, because we are a provider of organizational network analysis, we are lucky to have unprecedented access to this technology. And so we like to use it as part of our daily operations on a regular basis. And we do things, for example, like using active data sources like online surveys and passive sources like Office 365 and Gmail to answer key questions on a regular basis. So for example, we answer questions like, what's our level of productivity in the team? How is it evolving over time? What's our level of burnout risk? What's our workload capacity? How much time are we spending on meetings? When are those meetings taking place? What's our response time? And we analyze that between the team members and also with our partners. We operate with a global network of 11 partners in different countries like Brazil, Italy, France, Spain, United States, Singapore, etc. And taking into consideration these networks is key for us to be able to operate with a very lean team, still at global level, and scale up our operations. So when we were actually starting to look at our meetings and so on, one of the things that drew our attention was the fact that most of the meetings were concentrated very early in the morning and late at night. And we were discussing that internally because it was a little bit shocking. And we realized that early morning was actually the time when it was the best time to work with Europe. And late night in California time was the best time to work with Asia. So the key lesson learned there was that with organizational networks, it's everything about contextualization, right? In the end, what you are trying to do is to look at existing processes that you are working on, whether it is with change management, leadership development, just managing remote work, right? And you get a series of social capital metrics that help you complement those existing processes. But ultimately, it's everything about contextualization. So again, we are seeing on a regular basis to see like who are the organizations we're spending the most time with. Also great for benchmarking purposes, like which partners are doing a good job. Are there any best practices in their internal collaboration dynamics that we can replicate across other teams? So we like to make it part of our ongoing operations also because at CTS, we operate with a flat hierarchy. So we don't have hierarchical relationships between the team members. We got a team of 15 people spread across different time zones. And, this helps us actually a lot operate with that format in a scalable way and operate in an effective and efficient manner. So that would be a quick summary on how we use organizational networks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Francisco. Love to bring the question over to Jennifer. How does your organization leverage organizational networks?
Well, I love that question. I like to answer it in three parts. The first part I would say is an internal perspective to your point at Capgemini. When I think about how we leverage networks, there's so many ways, but I'm very passionate about leadership development. And so we really look at the networks that our leaders have. To Francisco's point, understanding the network and how we make better decisions, leadership development decisions, leadership positional decisions. Also, we are helping our leaders understand the value of their network. What type of network do they need to grow as they grow their leadership? When they're thinking about, and when you're an aspiring leader, or you're thinking about growing your leadership career or distinguishing your leadership career, when you get to the very top of your platform, if you will, how do you mobilize yourself? How do you find out what's happening across organizations and find your capability and fit so that way you can look inside your network? So I think internally we do a lot of development that way. We have a signature program called Connected Manager that we partner with Harvard on for the Connected Manager. And that is all about having connected managers who are there to help other leaders and their teams grow their skills, perform, create an agile culture, and just really be human-centered, but using a network style approach. The second part is external. With our clients, understanding who's in your network. So we are able to offer different innovative solutions to clients who are in different industries. So we are able to leverage solutions from one industry and help apply it to another client. So it's very helpful in understanding that market and the industry. Personally, I am a thought leader and I really am. I just love to collaborate. So hi, Maria Bucci. She's at IBM. I know where she is in New York. So good to see her on. But just thinking about that type of relationships that I have in the industry around sharing thought leadership with Francisco. We chat all the time about the future of work, about ONA. So being able to personally leverage your networks to share thought leadership is something that's dear to me.
Oh, this is great. This is like a great foundational question to kind of get your opinion on how decentralization kind of disrupts this. And real quick, you mentioned that the three things that you focus on is the internal networks, the external networks. What was the third one? I was writing it down.
Personal
Personal.
networks.
That's really good. Awesome. I like to kind of visualize and take notes when I'm kind of listening, so it kind of makes it more dynamic. So Andrew, I know I kind of pushed the question to you, the last one, but how does your organization leverage organizational networks today?
Now, I love the examples from Francisco and Jennifer. How do you actually leverage the networks internally to an organization, especially very large ones that Jennifer works in? But I want to throw in a couple of facts into this discussion, right? So when we think about org networks, we think about work networks. So over 700 million people have a profile on LinkedIn, which people associate with their professional career network. There's about 3.4 billion people in the global workforce, and half the world's working age women are not in the formal labor force. So I'm just throwing those facts out there to say that most of your really valuable network could well be outside of your organization. So I think that's my first kind of point. For example, Google has more contractors working for it than full-time employees. Now, one megatrend that I'm seeing is what I'd call the decentralized workforce. So it's the ability of millions to work outside of traditional employment using digital infrastructure. Now, there's talk of the great resignation as people are leaving firms en masse, but I would actually reframe this as the great flourishing. I think millions of people are able to make a living from their side hustle using platforms. They are teachers, carers, chefs, they care for pets, and they're using platforms to earn money. Okay, so I think that's really liberating for a lot of people. And I'll give you an example. I recently participated in some research commissioned by Accenture, and they were looking to identify the biggest future of work trends. So they identified 30 experts on cybersecurity, economics, HR, and talent. They then used a platform facilitated by Wikistrat for individuals to propose, shape, debate, and vote on these trends. And in this way, what Accenture got was a really valuable summary of thinking from outside their organization. They crowdsourced the ideas. So, you could take that model and apply it to large organizations. Are all your best ideas in your organization, or are they in your external network? I don't know. It depends. I'll give you another example. Another one, I mentioned that I've done research on blockchain, the decentralized workforce. What about brain trust, right? So this is like a talent matching platform in the ilk of Fiverr or Upwork. But here, workers control the network that they make their living on. And that's facilitated with crypto tokens, as it happens. And they get involved in community building activities, screening talent. The more active they are, the more tokens they get, and they have more equity in the platform that they rely on for their income. So I think that's really exciting. And that's just a couple of things that grab me when I think about organization analysis.
Wow, Andrew, well put. And this is very fascinating too, because for someone like myself, I'm very heavy on the investor side. And I think about what happens when you introduce something to a network, right? So a lot of people don't think about this, but let's say the price of, I don't know, maybe this pen right here, right? If every one of us were in the same room here, how much would you pay for this pen? Probably like 25 cents or something like that, a dollar, let's say. But what happens when we introduce this pen to a network? Now it's introduced to a large internet network and it has advanced price discovery. So that's what I'm seeing in the world today as like from an investor perspective. When you introduce an object like a rock that has no value, like between myself and a few people, but when you introduce that rock to an internet network of 1 million people, now you have this subjectivity in prices, and that rock could be sold for like $1 million. So that's an example of how introducing network to an object can really augment its value. At the same time, introducing a network to an individual today, and we have influencers, and then introducing a digital network to a workforce or like a large organization like IBM, and it's just like, wow, all this dynamic stuff. We could talk all day, but I got to go to the second question, and we're going to circle back with Francisco. So Francisco, the question that we got for you is, what role do you think organizational networks will play in enabling decentralized models?
Yeah, I love this conversation because this really looks like the typical conversation we will have every Friday about decentralization and networks, right? But that's the purpose of the fireside chat in the end, right? But um, well, I think what is important, what is important for people to understand is that uh, decentralization is going to disrupt uh, many different dimensions of work as we know it. So when we talk about decentralization today, people usually think about remote work, hybrid work models on site versus remote work, right? But we are already seeing decentralization disrupting other aspects. For example, the size of the organizations. Are you going to have a future where large organizations are going to try to replicate the collaboration dynamics of small startups, or are we going to have a future where smaller units are going to interact with each other and large organizations are not going to exist any longer? So are we going to have a reduced version of large organizations where a big part of the work is outsourced with the gig economy, right? Then another aspect is the hierarchy, right? Are we going to operate with flat hierarchies and non-hierarchical models, or are we going to operate with a hybrid model between decentralization and centralization? And then at CTS, we like to look at what are the main trends that are happening right now and anticipate how they can shape the future of work in that regard. But definitely, when it comes to decentralized work models and fluid work models, networks are always going to be the most effective and efficient framework to understand and manage those new realities. The same way that networks are the best framework that help us understand what has happened with the internet or what's happening with social networks, right? So the most important trends that I see right now, I love the way that Andy mentioned the great flourishing, right? I don't see that people leaving organizations has to be a negative thing, right? If we have to look at the context, but one of the main trends that we have to be looking at right now definitely is the decentralized ledger technologies like blockchain. We're looking at how the communities behind these technologies are organizing themselves in a decentralized manner, because the way that these technologies are written already assign specific roles and actions to the users in those community. And it has introduced also the tokenization of remuneration. That is also what I think Andy brought up, right? So for us, this is very, very important because it's a potential framework that we can use, again, for non-hierarchical frameworks. Now, another trend that is very interesting is the trend of circle management that has already been adopted by some companies here in Silicon Valley, like Zappos, Jammer, or GitHub. So what this means is that you got a number of people in the organization that will define high-level tasks, and then these tasks will be taken on by leaders of the so-called circles, that in the end is just informal groups of team members, and they will take these tasks and divide them in subtasks that are more simple. So this framework enables companies to operate without hierarchy, but at the same time, they can take on higher complexity tasks on a regular basis. This is one of the main challenges that smaller organizations can have. And then our vision at CTS is that ultimately the organizations of the future should be able to operate in an autonomous manner exclusively based on social capital metrics, right? Looking at things like what's the level of productivity, burnout risk, workload capacity, who are the informal leaders, what are organizational silos and bottlenecks. And this by itself, step by step, with combination of the tokenization of performance and artificial intelligence and basically all the technologies that are showing up, is defining step by step that framework. Coming back just to wrap up what you mentioned about the rock, right? What happens when you put a rock in a network? Basically, you are generating and visualizing the social capital of that rock. So then it's not the rock itself by its components, all the social interactions that are part of that asset, right? So that's a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah, it's amazing what happens when you introduce an object, an individual, an organization to a network, and a network at a scale, a digital scale that we've never seen before. And the reason why I brought up that, price discovery factor of, putting a network to a rock was I had a conversation one Friday night with some buddies, and they were just joking around. They said, "Kay, would you like to buy a slightly shotgun laptop on eBay?" And I'm like, who would buy that? But if you upload it to eBay, remember, it's introducing it to the network, the internet. And so now there's price discovery. And I don't know who would buy that, but now if you think about it, maybe someone that could just scavenge the parts of the computer. Who knows? So another man's trash, another person's treasure, right? So Jennifer, I'd love to move the question onto you next. It's what role do you think organizational networks will play in enabling decentralized work models?
Well, I love that question, and I think I'm so glad that we're able to talk about it now. I remember probably 20 some years ago when I was an engineer. I used to be an electrical engineer, and I was the youngest. I started my career when I was 19, and I remember thinking, wait a minute, this person is super smart. This person is super smart. This person is super smart. And I'm like, well, I have a level of intelligence. But I started thinking about networks way back then. How do we, as teams, as people, understand how to work in networks in order to get the collective intelligence? So I always would say, one head is fine, but I'm better if I'm with a group, like connected to people. And so I think the knowledge and the intelligence and the skill set is better as a collective. So I think now the future of work, and I love what Andy said. When I first went to Capgemini, I think like on day one, they were like, "Oh, Jennifer, we follow your leadership. You're coming from IBM. What is our strategy on culture and learning and talent?" I was like, "Well, flourishing. I think that organizations now are expected to help people flourish, not just at work, but in life. And when you think about well being and flourishing and happiness and freedom, organizational networks give people the freedom to show up. Networks to me is that PERMA acronym that you'll see in flourishing and in well being around positive emotions, engaged work, relationships that are strong, meaningful work, and the A stands for a sense of accomplishment. So that PERMA acronym to me is how do we help people with networks flourish with who they are at work and personally. And I do think organizations are required to do that now. Any company that is not creating a culture or a space for people to flourish, I don't think they'll be here for the long term. At Capgemini, one of the secret things about Capgemini that I don't think the world understands, and I really appreciate now, Capgemini started in 1967. It's a huge company of hundreds of thousands of employees, but they have this thriving entrepreneurial culture. And most of the time, you'll see a culture like that with these networks that are, decentralized, centralized. Yes, there is that hierarchy and places, but they have a thriving entrepreneurial culture at that large scale. So there are some drawbacks and there are some advantages. So I think that each and every one of us, in my mind, every individual has to start working on how do we actually navigate complexity when it comes to networks. And that's something, a skill set, that a capability that I'm putting in to like the leadership framework, the actual performance management. How do you navigate? How agile are you? How do you navigate complexity? And now with the models, I think we need more leaders in that leadership complexity model. We need more leaders who are able to navigate that. If not, back to Andrew's point around the great talent reset, people have choice, they have freedom, and they will go where they can flourish.
Yeah, I love the was it the Great Resignation, the Great Flourishing, the reset in talent. The way I kind of think of it from a investor economic perspective is I'm seeing massive inflation in the markets, and here in Silicon Valley, if you actually look at the numbers, we're inflating at a rate of 13%.
Yes,
Not wage inflation. Inflation is going at 13% and wage inflation is at 3%. So every
yes.
year, that's a 10% delta. Every employee is getting poorer by 10% because of the inflation is just too fast here. So when I think about it from an investor perspective, it's not so much to me, a talent reset, but it's just
Mhm.
humans responding to positive economics and moving away from negative economics. Like if that
Yes.
job is going to bring me a negative 10 delta every year, minus 10%
Mhm.
in purchasing power every year. And this
Mhm.
gig economy role just got even more
Mhm.
superior when the gig economy role evolved from like I
Mhm.
don't know, like a Uber job to like a decentralized, hardened type of
Mhm.
gig worker. Uh,
Mhm.
it just, it's interesting. We really have to track this because I believe there's massive investment opportunities, but also massive changes to like global society.
But think about it like this. I love this word freedom. And I know I'm talking soft terms, but I'm big on it. Like I said,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
a business person and engineer, but I really like get at the core of people like freedom.
Oh
Freedom
yeah.
is tied, is tied to our very existence. And when you have a civilization or society or world where you actually take away freedoms, then you take away the voice and the choice of people. What you're seeing now with networks are giving people more freedom to choose these things, to get into these gigs. So for me, like if I don't have freedom, I don't exist in my
Yeah.
in my heart, in my mind, in my voice. And people are starting to discover, to your point about the rock, discovering it. They have freedom now. They can
Yep.
choose
Yep. Yep.
where
Yep.
they work. They can choose if they
We
want to work or not.
just like how we introduce a network to a rock and that rock found price discovery in a marketplace. Now we're also introducing a network, an audience to communication,
Yes.
right? And so people are much more informed these days. It's a different regime when you think about the way the markets move today. People
Yes.
are
Thank
buying
goodness.
uh,
Thank
people
goodness.
people are buying, meme stocks and stuff like that. And so it's a again very fascinating and very dynamic, very globally synchronized bullish environment, I feel. um Anyways, Andrew, I like to bring the last question back to you. What role do you think organizational networks will play in enabling decentralized work models?
Well, what a great conversation. I might answer that question, Kay, but I'm going to start with taking your rock and putting a face on it and giving it skills and attributes and
Oh
throwing
yeah.
it in the talent market, right? Let's give it a token, dollar rock, right? So this rock can then sell itself onto the market, whatever it does, it becomes, so
I
that
love that.
I've built on it, and you throw it in, and what's the value of what that person does, in the market. And I love Jennifer's point about freedom. Yeah, I think we found that the COVID pandemic has accelerated these trends, right? People have found different ways to live, different ways to earn. They've thought about life and meaning as well. There's a spiritual aspect to this about how people want to live their lives. And it comes down to wanting autonomy, flexibility. And Jennifer, your point about flourishing for employers, yeah, employers' role changes. If you want to keep people, you need to offer them more than just wages, bonuses, whatever. You need to give them a sense of belonging, meaning, and purpose. And I think that, and a social network too, right? So we're all social beings. That includes, dating, the coffee shop chats, whatever. An employer needs to bring that in to allow us to flourish as human beings. So what role will organization networks play in decentralized work models? Well, I mentioned I did some research, right, about the new infrastructure of work. So let's first of all ditch the resume that was invented by Leonardo da Vinci in 1482. Let's ditch the resume that 70% of people lie on their resume and CVs. Would you believe it? In an age where we can search for anything on Google, the world of work hasn't even looked at our infrastructure for 20 years for the rest of it. We're using century-old processes for doing our hiring and some of the management processes. So here's the hypothesis, right? That we have a digital verifiable career profile with skills, attributes. We could bring in personality testing, all this kind of stuff. But that is controlled by us. We only share that data with people who we trust, right? So it's not held on centralized servers. There's no spam, there's no hacks. So we control it. And a lot of data is moving that way as we move from Web 2 business models to Web 3 business models, as Kay mentioned. And yes, investment changes, but boy, so does everything else: education, society, and work. So when I did some research on this with Don Tapscott and the Blockchain Research Institute, we hypothesized that what this would mean is more efficient and reliable work matching platforms. Okay, so The Rock can go and trade his or her skills for money or tokens or whatever. But that's more efficient. We trust what we're getting, and that has great benefits for individuals who want autonomy and money and equity, and for employers who want to make sure that doctor and nurse are who they say they are and have done what they've said they've done. So that's one thing. What happens then in that scenario is the firm becomes smaller because we can just pull from this liquid workforce when we need to. blockchain, decentralized technologies enable the payment mechanisms to work more efficiently, not on the monthly payroll as they have in the UK or every couple of weeks in the US, for example. So that changes. So I think that's going to change things an awful lot. So let me give you a couple of examples of decentralized organizations that are forming from groups of individuals. So one is in the publishing industry. So, you know, from subscription to the New York Times, to whatever else you read on the internet. There's a group called Mirror, and it's basically owned by writers who issue tokens called write tokens. And with a token, it enables you to vote for who gets on the platform. So it's only, the decision is made by the group of writers. And also that token gives them equity in that platform. So they own it. So if an article or video or something, you know, is worth money, then they have a share in it. That's a simple example. Extrapolate that to other industries outside of publishing, and you can see where there is attraction for individuals and also for creating great work, creative work, social work, entrepreneurial work. I'll give you another example from the metaverse, and it's Decentraland, which is a fully decentralized 3D virtual world, right? So it's a multiplayer game. But within this, they've created an environment where you can buy land, you can create concerts, you can sell tickets, art shows, all this kind of stuff. So you can buy real estate within this virtual environment. Now that might seem a bit far-fetched for us on this webinar, but talk to any 17 or 18-year-old about this, and they get it straight away, and they're building new economies. So that's your future workforce right there, who are used to trading in the metaverse. Now, my last comment on this is decentralized autonomous organizations that are being built are fascinating. I'm not sure how they're going to go, which industries they're going to take off in. But what you need to remember, and I think this is a good reminder for the tech industry, is that we still need human characteristics to make these networks work. It's still people who operate in them, and it operates on trust. And it will be subject to the rule of social psychology, where people are involved. It's not just, you know, tech platforms, people run them. An obvious point, but sometimes missed.
Wow, Andrew, amazing response. I want to make sure I tell you this. I love the fact that you evolved our conversation from the rock, gave it attributes, made it a human, turned it into a decentralized worker. At the same time, another point that you mentioned that I liked as well is, you know, the world today with this, it no longer divides by physical borders, as I was mentioning on a call, right? Today, people know the world as like, I mean, it's still true, but one layer of the world is USA or Americas, South America, Europe, Asia, right? But then now with the internet and the connection of it, we're all connected, and we're seeing the rise of like that mirror community, which is a mirror community is a community of writers. And as you write, they could sell their own tokens and all that. So that's showing me that the world is evolving away from just, hey, you're in the USA, hey, you're in Europe, hey, you're in Asia. But now we divide by hashtags. We divide by topics like, hey, you're a writer and you belong to this writer community across the world. Hey, you're an investor. You belong to this investor hashtag or community across the world. And if you rise up in that community, you could issue your own tokens. So now it's like micro nations. Isn't that amazing? We went from like, you know, big national physical nation, physical borders to now digital borders. And these digital borders are shaped in terms of like, oh, the investor hashtag, the traveler hashtag, the cook hashtag. So it's
amazing.
providing jobs, right? And then the last point,
sorry,
the last point I wanted to add to that is, you know, now that things are divided into micronations, you further said about Decentraland, which is a video game, and the kids are all about it, and you said they're building these new digital economies.
Yeah.
So I wanted to put the last thing on that. My note is playing equals building. The act of them playing the game is them actually building the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Playing equals building. It's amazing.
There's a big economy being built. Yeah. They call them playborers, right? So it's people making a living from playing games, either because they're good at it, right, in esports, or they're doing tasks within these virtual worlds and earning credits, earning money, part of the economy. So, you know, it's a small but growing part of the economy, and the games industry is bigger than the movie industry, isn't it? It's enormous. So
yeah. like gamers are a untapped labor force, right? Like when you think about software like Uber or Airbnb, those entrepreneurs were thinking about, well, look, for Uber, all these cars are sitting around. Can we monetize them by putting them to use? They're an asset, right? Same thing with Airbnb. All this space is underutilized. Can we put it to use? Can we introduce technology which introduces a network to all of these spaces and then allow people to rent out that Airbnb space? Same
No,
thing with
it's really
Uber, right?
exciting. And
Yeah.
bringing it back to talent and HR, maybe we need to put our milk round, our talent attraction shows in Decentraland to create events and to try and get groups and teams of people who may be game together to come and join your organization for a particular task or job or whatever. I think that could be on the agenda as well.
Yeah, the technology ties in with Jennifer's view as well, right? The equitable, fair distribution future, right? It's freedom and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because
I want to share something about what you said about the games, because I just find this fascinating. It's 2021. I remember in 1998, seriously, this is a true story. Like I took my first internship was at IBM, and I was in college. I was a freshman in college, and they said, hey, we want to do something new. IBM is always on the cutting edge of doing things. We want to do something new. We want to bring in some people who are in engineering or software development, and we want to pay you to play games. And I was like, video games? They was like, yeah, we have this PS2, we have this computer called the Aptiva. It has all types of multimedia on there. And I was like, 1997, they called me. I started in 1998. I started IBM developing and playing video games. At the time, they had something called Second Life, which sounds like Decentraland. Second Life, it was amazing. I remember just being in there, meeting people, building stuff, building things, creating lands. And then they also had this thing called, I think it was called Home Director. And it was like the Internet of Things. So you can literally connect this to your house and turn your lights on and program things. I was 19. So fast forward to 2021, and I look at technology and I look at the networks and I look at the digital revolution that's happened. It's almost like time, and technology has to catch up with the ideas. So the ideas back then was the same concept, but now evolution is acceptable to make money on video games or to play video games for a living and develop. These things are acceptable. And I tell the programmers now, I wish I could be a programmer today, because back then programming was much harder. And now they share code, talk about network, they get all the code and they share the code. Yeah, they just borrow code and share code, open source. Then you had to develop it from the ground up. So I think that when you think about the agreements in society, I think networks are literally reshaping our social contract. The social contract that we once had 20 years ago, 40 years ago, as being reshaped. And so now, even the employee agreement, to Andrew's point around, workers, how do we hire talent? When you look at the way institutions are set up, some of them are not structured to be able to hire these, what we used to call freelancers or gig people, these type of things. So you got to we're starting to look at, what does employment agreement look like? So the very nature of our social contract with society has evolved, to me, and I'm glad, because it's a greater good, but our social contract is changed.
Yep. Go ahead, Francisco.
No, just wanted to first encourage the people to put questions on the chat, right? Because I guess we're discussing many topics, and it would be great also to engage it. I saw a comment from Maria Bucci earlier, right? That networks are about hope, and I love the connection that Jennifer made earlier, that networks are about freedom and hope as well, right? Because we often talk, especially in Silicon Valley, we talk about networks, as frameworks in a very technical manner, very cold component to it, right? But ultimately, this already started to impact our lives, and I think it's important to make that emotional argument to people so they understand, what is at stake here. Like when you look right now at society across different areas, whether it is stock market, social media, or finance, we're starting to see decentralized systems emerge. But the problem is because work itself is not yet fully decentralized. There are centralized systems that are controlling those decentralized environments. And that's something potentially very dangerous, because when you get hierarchical organization controlling a non-hierarchical ecosystem, the result can be even worse than what we have at the moment with centralized systems, right?
I actually have a dark side question to ask everyone. This is a K question, but I want to make sure I respond to Jennifer about what she said about the games, because she was amazed at the games back then versus the games today. Think about what we've been talking about this whole entire relationship today. Back then, the old school games didn't have access to a network. Today, the games are networked, and because they're networked, a kid playing a 16, 13-year-old playing a game, if they, from 16 to 26, 10 years of playing a game, they grow out of the game, they're like, I'm tired of the game. They could now sell their in-game inventory through a network and get some Ethereum and get real money. There's interoperability now. So that's the difference between the games back then and the games today. It's, once again, introduced to a network. The power of introducing an object, a concept, communication, people, talent to a network changes everything. And then the other thing that I write it down. So the difference with the individual today is remote work is becoming pretty accepted now, right? So if it's pretty accepted, then the person with the most network today has outside competitive demand, if you think about it. So employers, if IBM wants to hire me, well, I got people all around the world that wants to hire me now. So now the talent is also networked. We got to really think about this. So sorry, I had to circle back to that with Jennifer, but I do have a fascinating question. I don't think anyone's, well, someone did ask a question, but I wanted to bring in this question, the dark side of all this, because we talk about, the positivity and all that. As I'm analyzing enterprise software or just software in general, what the reason why I'm seeing decentralized technologies or blockchain technologies exist is because no matter what startup I invest into next, right? I know that every centralized startup that I invested in today, in the next 10 years, they will pay the three monopolies or the three oligopolies. They will pay Microsoft Azure, Amazon AWS, and Google Cloud Platform. No matter what, no matter if you scale to, if I invest in the next Facebook, the next MongoDB, the next Salesforce, whichever, they're going to end up paying those three monopolies somehow, right? And so this is why this new world exists. So we understand that software, something like a Google, is super networked, right? At one point, Trump was super networked on Twitter, right? I'm talking about the dark side of everything. And then Twitter had to deplatform him. So if we move into this decentralized world, the dark side question is, can an individual get too networked? Flip the question on you guys, huh? Can someone get too networked in this new world that we're coming into? Can a social media influencer have too much of a big network? No one's thinking about that. So I'd love to hear your take. Anyone
Can I just link that to a question that somebody asked on the chat?
Sure.
So to link, can you be too networked? From Mariana O'Neill, can I elaborate on the role of social psychology?
Ooh.
So just to link those together, just my personal view, I've got a psychology degree, a master's, but I'm not a practicing psychologist. But just to give my view on that is the research around social networks, online digital social networks, is that we, as human beings, we still tend to follow the rules that were developed over the last 50, 100 years, right? So we've still got our closest friends of 5. We can count them on our hand, right? We've still got a slightly larger group of 15, probably our loved ones or whatever, and then it goes up, and they reckon that you can only know about 150 people, right? So I think I've got 7,000 connections on LinkedIn, and I don't know what they all look like or what they're doing. They're not all my friends, but you know how it is, and same with these social networks. So to Kay's point, we could be connected with 6 billion people in the world, but we've still got our 5 best buddies and loved ones and a slightly wider group who we trust, etc. That isn't going to change, and hopefully that's kind of my answer to Mariana's point as well. As humans, we are altered a little bit by networks, but I still don't think that's going to change too much.
So I mean, great response. Can we be too network? I love what you said about. So when I think about it, right, you have 7,000 connections on LinkedIn. The kids today in elementary school, when I was in elementary school, I could do something embarrassing in class in the room, only 30 kids would know. Today, if I was at elementary school, I do something embarrassing, some kid could just put it on the internet and 1 million people find out.
Yeah, it's very embarrassing, yes.
The power of a network is really a double-edged sword.
Yeah, definitely.
Jennifer or Francisco, any comments on being too networked? Is there any dark side to that?
I think it goes back to having, a skill, like a capability. You have to learn how to build networks and how to leverage them for what purposes. Sometimes people build up networks and they change and something happens and they have to build up another one for another purpose, or they have to get smarter. So I think when I start to think about like the premise of your question around, like the Googles, um, AWS. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna just
yeah,
just going back to your question and
yeah,
monopoly. I
yeah,
think
yeah,
we start to cross over into um, this socialism, capitalism type
yeah,
argument. And what happens is, to me, in capitalism, inventors thrive, people with ideas and intelligence thrive, and you work and you develop great ideas. Then when you go over to socialism, and if you go to the extreme on communists, then you start to suppress some of those ideas and creativity. So
yeah,
if you think about the premise of your question, to me, the question is really not can you be too networked, but is
yeah,
there going to be some type of suppression if there are too many ideas or too many influence or too many creators? Because
yeah,
creatives are made in networks, inventors are made in networks,
yeah,
ideation is in networks, talent, evolution is in networks. So is there a faction that will suppress once the network or the group or the individual becomes too, you know, powerful in somebody's mind?
yeah,
That
exactly.
is really what's underneath that. And as an engineer and a creator, I don't like to see ideas and inventions and things suppressed. Back to freedom again. Do
Yeah,
people have too much freedom?
yeah,
You
yeah,
you
yeah,
tell me.
yeah, yeah.
Tell
You're
me.
right. Too much freedom, bad choices, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, in- I think I think um, we have to step by step change the mentality, right, from trying to reverse engineering interactions to kind of like how we can make organic interactions scale up, and to
Yeah,
ensure that everyone has the right opportunities to develop a network in the current environment. Uh,
yeah,
I like to make an analogy with quantum computing, actually, because with quantum computing, if you go into the origins of the technology,
yeah,
people really don't know what's going on with the particles, right? How sometimes they
yeah,
behave as light, sometimes they behave as matter, right? But even not knowing how that phenomenon exists, because it's so observable and repeatable, you can build a whole system and a new economy and reality on top of it. So here it happens kind of like the same. We don't really understand what motivates a person to recognize somebody as an influencer or as an informal leader in an organization, right? What we know is that those organic interactions are way more powerful than any type of formal structure that you want to impose on an organization, whether it is a social network, a stock market, finance, or a company working on a regular basis. So I think the question is not if somebody can get too large of a network, but how has that network, how was that network created? Was it created with, for example, with fake bots, or like using legal means? So we should not punish the organic recognition. We should
mm-hmm.
somehow ensure that the way those networks come to happen is democratized and equal to all the people. But then you have to respect the results of what people are saying, what people are recognizing and not recognizing, right? I think I don't
Yeah,
agree with moderation or suppression, as Jennifer was indicating, of people's opinions, right?
yeah.
And that's what this decentralization is about.
I really love what one of the audience member commented here, Maria. She said, "Too much of anything is a bad thing, and network requires personal accountability." But going back to too much of anything is a bad thing. I think so too. And I think the way I kind of see the human race, the way we adopt something or the way technology is evolving, right? Like the three-legged monopolies, they're too powerful now. So then blockchain came into the world to kind of remove some of that power away or take that power away. Like if you think about it, a great piece of technology that I use today is the Brave browser, right? Because like when I really thought about it, like why does Brave exist? If I were to analyze it from an investor perspective, well, we don't pay attention to the simple basic data of attention that we give away on like when we Google search something. They're capitalizing on our attention. Like we're searching for, I don't know, what to eat, food to eat, and then you get these advertisements. So are you really, the path that you're moving in this life, is it really true to what you're searching for? Or you were searching for something and then someone with big pockets were able to pay for, you know, where you go next in life? So those are very philosophical things that I like to kind of think deeply about. Um, yeah. So guys, we have about 4 minutes left. You know, I love that we kind of had a super dynamic conversation. I love how we evolved the conversation. I'm not sure if the audience has any other questions that they want to ask about networks, decentralization. Oh, we got one question. I do apologize. We only got, I guess, time for one question, and I'm going to close it out. So the question is, human resource question from Carlos. There are global trends on wellness, respect for the environment, and general awareness. And in my opinion, in some organizations, this is still empty statements, which could be understood as an organizational lie. Wow. Are there possible routes regarding the future of organizations in the human resources area to address this? Anyone can answer.
Well, I'll say we actually have an agenda. You know, part of my role is the culture agenda, and it's not just a word. I agree with whoever asked that question. It can be empty statements. Like you used to put these nice words on walls when we were in the office, or you put it on digital walls now, but we have to actually live it. We have to have integrity. So the only reason I actually took this role is because they had a culture agenda that included well-being. And there's a strategy that we have in place to focus on well-being. It's out front. It's not in the background. It's not hidden behind the EAP programs and HR. We do have the EAP programs, but it's really about staving that off. Companies again are required to create a place that fosters well-being, that fosters the not just mental well-being, but emotional, the spiritual well-being you were talking about. Spiritual meaning helping people find purpose and
Yeah.
meaning in life. So yeah, I agree that it is a table stake right now that all organizations, if you are looking for a job or an organization, check out their culture strategy, their well-being strategy. Look to see if it aligns with your agenda. So I agree with him.
Thank you for that. And Francisco, Andrew, any last comments or response on that question? I gotta close it out.
Just a final comment, and that's
Sure.
to people listening. And it's well worth spending time nurturing your networks inside and outside of your organization, because you're going to need them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes, from my side, just one to what I want to mention. You know, what there is inside admire people like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk is because they look at technology, right, and they don't look at it as a cold piece of metal sitting in some storage, right? But they look at it in terms of design, of purpose, right? I mean, look at Elon Musk. He spent like all his fortune. He really risked it all to make SpaceX and Tesla survive, right? It is crazy, you know. When you think the personal stake that he had in that stage is just mind blowing. So, you know, I think that for all the challenges related to environment, you know, employee well-being, all the mental health crisis that we're having now, that we had before, especially in the United States, but also as a result of the pandemic, right? How we structure those new frameworks that we are going to generate, understand, and manage through networks, the way that those frameworks are structured is really, really important, because ultimately it's just a game of incentives, right? People are like water, will just flow depending on the shape of the way that the path that they're creating for us. So if those incentives are proper incentives that are intelligently they're designed in an intelligent manner, we're going to be more prone to engage in more positive activities. If not, we will engage in more negative activities. So the design of platforms like Twitter, again, stock market, finance, the design, how they design that conversation incentivize us to speak in a certain way or engage in a certain way. Are we anonymous? Yep. Are we not anonymous? You know, so this type of stuff. But definitely, it's going to be a very exciting time to see, you know, how all this technology is going to evolve and how it's going to change our lives.
Yep. Everyone, I'd love to today. Thank the panelists for the time. Jennifer, I know you kind of hopped in. I hope I didn't push you too hard on the questions, but it's been a super duper real pleasure chatting with everyone today. Thank you so much for the audience as well for coming out and listening to us. But we're at top of the hour, and I want to be super respectful of everyone's time. So once again, thanks everyone for coming out to episode 3. Hope to see everyone next time.
Thank
Oh,
you.
we got.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Oh, you're
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
welcome.
everyone. Have a
Welcome,
great
welcome.
day.
Thanks everyone. Bye bye.